And good morning, and could MPs, panelists take their seats, please? We have our two panelists here, or is it three?
We have three this morning, but I believe one is on video conference for the first panel.
We have three?
Yeah, Mr. Loomis is connected.
Oh, he's going video?
Yeah. So maybe if you want to start, we can start with Mr. Loomis.
Again, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Eiking, and I'm chair of the committee here, the International Trade Committee. And today we're going to continue on with our study on the potential for an agreement between Canada and Pacific Alliance countries. That's Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. This is, I think, our third meeting, and it's great to see we have witnesses here. And we also have somebody on video conference from the Connors brothers. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Tilson. Welcome to our committee. Good to see you here.
Good to get up early morning.
Well, you'll find this a very exciting and feisty committee, and it'll be better than a jolt of coffee for you.
Okay.
So I think we have quorum here, and without further ado, and we have three sets of witnesses. The video is not through yet.
Yeah, it is.
So with us, we have this morning from the Canola Council of Canada, Mr. Innes, and we have from Connor Brothers on video conference, Mr. Lomas, and we also have Mr. Dade as an individual. Welcome, everyone, and if some of you have been before us before and on committees before, and if your opening statements could be under five or under minutes, it would be appreciated, and then we can have lots of dialogue with the MPs, and we're going to try to wrap this up in 45 minutes. Which gives us lots of time for questions and answers. I like to always start off with the videos first in case we get a mix-up. And if Mr. Lomas, if you are all right, we can get you to start right off the bat. Are you good to go?
I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you, sir. You got the floor.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is David Lomas, Vice President, Marketing and Business Development with the International Division of Connors Brothers Cloverleaf Seafoods Company. I'm going to shorten the company reference to just Connors going forward in the interest of time. Thank you on behalf of Connors to all members of the Standing Committee on International Trade for the opportunity to participate in the consultation process on the Pacific Alliance Free Trade Agreement. Connors is one of Canada's oldest food companies. We have operated a sardine and herring cannery in Blacks Harbour, New Brunswick since the 1880s. We currently employ about 600 people at our Blacks Harbour facility and are one of the main employers in Charlotte County, New Brunswick. The majority of our production from Blacks Harbour is exported. In addition, we operate an international sales and marketing office in St. John, New Brunswick that sells canned seafood through our own brands in over 50 markets around the world. Our Canadian head office is in Markham, Ontario. We are responsible for just under half of all canned seafood sales in Canada through our own brands, Cloverleaf and Brunswick. In addition, we have a sushi quality frozen seafood food service business through our Innova unit. We are affiliated with Bumblebee Seafoods in the United States with its headquarters in San Diego, California. And we are owned by Lion Capital, a UK headquartered private equity firm. Our company activity as both an exporter and importer of seafood products provides us with insights into both sides of international trade in seafood, particularly in shelf-stable canned seafood. Connors understands the following regarding a potential FTA between Canada and the Pacific Alliance. The Pacific Alliance was created in 2011 and its members are Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. In 2017, the Pacific Alliance invited certain observer states, including Canada, to become associate members. While Canada has FTAs with all four members, associate membership would involve a new FTA with the alliance as a bloc. Connors is not importing any products into Canada from Pacific Alliance members at this time, other than a relatively small amount of canned Atlantic salmon from Chile. We currently export a relatively small amount of canned sardine and herring products to Mexico from Canada under NAFTA. Each of the Pacific Alliance members have diverse and well-developed seafood industry. Mexico, Chile, and Peru each have robust canned sardine and canned mackerel industries that actively compete against Connors in global markets, in addition to having solid and entrenched branded distribution in their local markets. Connors has several concerns related to a potential Pacific Alliance FTA with respect to our Canadian operations. Current herring resource constraints in Canada means that there are no market outlet advantages gained by an FTA with the Pacific Alliance for our company with canned sardines and herring production from our Blacks Harbor facility. We currently have to procure finished goods mainly from Europe to meet our overall corporate requirements for our branded sales in Canada and other international markets. Our labor cost differentials versus Pacific Alliance members puts our continued production at risk in New Brunswick. Also, our labor standards and obligations are disproportionately higher than many competitively sources of supply by Pacific Alliance members, which further affects our competitiveness. There is also the issue of differences in regulatory requirements versus Pacific Alliance members. Our Blacks Harbor operation is subject to compliance under a number of Canadian regulatory bodies, including CFIA and DFO. Having operations in the Pacific Alliance being subject to the same regulatory conditions and standards as those imposed on Canadian harvesting and manufacturing operations is critical to our continuing long-term competitiveness and in ensuring a level playing field for our products both domestically and abroad. We are unclear as to what implications an FTA with the Pacific Alliance bloc will have with respect to NAFTA. In closing, the pre-existing FTAs between Canada and Pacific Alliance members, along with the concerns cited above, means, at least to Connor's current perspective, there are no easily identifiable new and significant trade opportunities that will open up under an FTA with the bloc for exports of our shelf-stable and canned seafood products from Canada. Thank you for this opportunity to appear as a witness.
Sir, your business has been around a long time, Atlantic Canada. Did you say when you started or how many years you've been in business?
Since the 1880s.
Yes, I thought you said that. I thought it was 19. Yeah.
We're actively we're about to celebrate our 125th year as a promotion in the Caribbean areas in Central America.
Good for you guys. Thank you very much. We're going to move over to the Canola Council of Canada. Mr. Ennis, you got the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair. We're very pleased to be here to represent the Canola Council of Canada. And I'm pleased to share with you how an agreement with the Pacific Alliance will help eliminate trade barriers facing our sector, will help support value-added processing here in Canada, and can help us grow our canola exports to these countries. The Canola Council is a value chain organization representing the over 40,000 canola growers in Canada, the seed developers, the canola processors who turn canola seed into canola oil and meal for livestock consumption, as well as the exporters who send canola for processing at its destination. Canada exports more than 90% of the canola we grow here, either as seed, as oil, or as meal. Our industry supports eliminating trade barriers wherever they exist, including in Pacific Alliance countries. Trade agreements that eliminate tariffs and make trade more predictable are critical to help grow the $27 billion that our industry contributes to the Canadian economy every year. So today I'd like to share how tariffs are hampering our exports to Pacific Alliance countries and how other trade barriers could be addressed through a trade agreement with these countries. First, what tariffs currently challenge our exports to Pacific Alliance countries? As the committee understands, we currently have free trade agreements with some members of the Pacific Alliance, and as a consequence, we don't have tariffs for our products going to Mexico, Chile, and Peru. And although we have a free trade agreement with Colombia, we still face punitive and unpredictable tariffs on our canola oil exports. So despite this Canada-Colombia free trade agreement, we do not have competitive access for our canola oil to this country. This is because of tariffs applied through the Andean price band system. So these tariffs make our product uncompetitive as oil from the United States does not face these tariffs going into Colombia. Every 2 weeks, the price band system sets tariffs that apply to canola. In recent months, this tariff has been as high as 40%. The tariff can change every 2 weeks. This means that not only does the tariff make our canola uncompetitive compared to American canola or soybeans or other oils, but it makes it difficult to have any predictability for our exporters. So the tariff established today at the time of sale or when it leaves the port may not be the same as when that shipment arrives in Colombia. So we also believe that these tariffs are inconsistent with Colombia's WTO obligations. So for example, the price band systems of Chile and Peru have been successfully challenged under WTO provisions. An agreement with the Pacific Alliance offers an opportunity to eliminate these tariffs, putting us on a level playing field and helping to make trade more predictable. This will help improve our ability to export canola oil and add more value to our product here in Canada. Secondly, I'd like to highlight how a trade agreement could address other barriers. There are many similarities faced for the agriculture sectors who export in both Pacific Alliance countries and our Canadian exporters. As large agricultural exporters across these countries, we face common restrictions related to the misapplication of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, non-tariff barriers, measures around plant breeding innovation as well. A trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance has the potential to build momentum for a consistent approach to these issues in our economies and beyond. So lastly, I'd like to highlight the need to stay focused on critical trade agreements and negotiations while we proceed with the Pacific Alliance. We believe that trade agreements and trade barriers should be eliminated wherever they exist, and this includes pursuing an agreement with the Pacific Alliance. But we also believe that priority should be assigned to agreements where the stakes are the highest, such as maintaining current access to the United States and Mexico, as well as implementing the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership and starting trade negotiations with China. In closing, canola has grown into a Canadian success story because we are globally competitive and we've had stable access to world markets. We're continuing to deliver growth through our stable and open trade that we have with some countries, differentiated value, and sustainable production. We're excited to help Canada meet the government's target of $75 billion in agri-food exports by 2025. And eliminating trade barriers through an agreement with the Pacific Alliance is a key opportunity to help us do this. It'll allow us to help support value-added processing here in Canada, and it's a key part of enabling our sector to continue supporting the 250,000 Canadian jobs of our sector. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. That's an impressive story of that crop that was designed in Canada, right?
That's right.
It's becoming a world leader. Very good. We're going to go to Mr. Dade now. He's a senior fellow at the School of International Development and Global Studies here at the University of Ottawa. Go ahead, sir. You got the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président et membres du Conseil pour l'occasion.
Thank you very much, Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to present to you once again. And I'd like to start by repeating or really putting an emphasis on what Brian just says.
Or SNAFTA. But this morning, I've submitted a briefing note to the committee on the Pacific Alliance. I've been following the alliance, lecturing, researching on it for about a decade now, ever since former Prime Minister Harper attended a meeting convened by the leaders of the alliance, minus Colombia, at the 2007 APEC summit to discuss the idea of launching a new trade integration group in the Americas. So I'll let the note speak for itself. It serves as background. I'm not going to go through the details on the specifics of trade and the various sectors. You have the witnesses to do that. I would also suggest that in the 10 years, the alliance has made remarkable progress on the trade integration agenda. It's considered by observers such as myself and groups like The Economist magazine, Financial Times, as the most exciting development in international trade. I suppose that says a lot for international trade if something like this is considered exciting, but that indeed is the case. I would suggest if the committee wants to get details on the technical aspects of how the alliance is progressing on the integration agenda, how they're working to combine behind the border initiatives, one-stop shops throughout the alliance for businesses coming in. That information is available at the in-house think tank for the alliance. That think tank is at the Trade Integration Division at the Inter-American Development Bank. They've been working with the alliance since its inception, and they would be able to brief you in the minute details of exactly what the integration agreement is, what progress is being made, and other technical details. The head of the unit, Antonio Estevedrell, is also a member of the Policy Council for the Trade and Investment Center at the Canada West Foundation. So he and his team are in Canada at least once a year, and they're quite familiar with issues in Canada, and they'd be uniquely positioned to brief the committee on issues on the technical side of what the alliance is doing. I've already given the name to Christine and the contact details for the folks at the IDB, should you wish to call them. Finally, a brief note. We're starting in Canada to sign agreements that are actually important for a larger swath of the business community than what I would call the usual suspects. Groups that are already trading with countries like those in the Pacific Alliance, larger firms. We're starting to sign agreements that matter for small and medium enterprises. As we run into difficulties with NAFTA, more and more of these firms that have habitually and by default always traded and never looked beyond the U.S. are beginning to think about looking beyond the U.S. So agreements like CETA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, are gaining interest. We've done work in talking to small businesses in Western Canada about how to prepare should NAFTA end, and looking at tariffs in the U.S., talking to their U.S. suppliers and customers. But that work on helping businesses to think through the issues has got these smaller businesses thinking about trade agreements, yet they're not on the radar screen of our traditional trade export and promotion groups. So a true progressive trade agenda in Canada would be one that reaches all marginalized groups, groups that have been marginalized from the benefits of signing trade agreements and trade. That includes groups the government has identified, and we fully support their efforts to try and help these groups participate in trade. But it also includes the small and medium enterprises that haven't been participating in trade. So I would suggest and put on the table for the committee that a study in the future, a place where this committee could really do good work, would be taking the evidence and laying the foundation for this major shift in Canadian trade policy to focus on bringing in groups that have been, for whatever reason, marginalized from trade. The Foreign Affairs Committee did seminal work on laying the basis and the evidence for a shift in Canadian development policy to leverage the private sector. I think this committee could do the same thing. We need evidence. We need a basis for this major policy shift at a time when we're finally starting to sign agreements, again, that we see matter. And we hear from small businesses that haven't been thinking about trade, agreements that matter for them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for coming and bringing your knowledge and your some of the suggestions for our committee. There is a potential that we might be traveling to Washington, and that organization, American Development Bank, I think they're in Washington, so it might be a good idea if we go there to meet up with them. So thanks for that advice. We're going to get going, and we're going to have some dialogue with MPs now, and we're going to have the Conservatives starting up for 5 minutes. Mr. Allison, you got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to our witnesses, thanks for being here today. Mr. Day, I'm going to start with you. We had the Business Council up here before us on Tuesday, and they talked about agreements like CETA and TPP being the gold standard for trade agreements. So I guess my question would be, do you agree with that? And then do you see that serving as part of the model and the baseline as we move forward for the Pacific Alliance deal?
Certainly. I would also put the Pacific Alliance in that model, too. But the alliance is a bit different. It's a trade integration group. It's countries that have had a closer relation that are looking to build upon that. some of the other agreements, CETA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, are countries that haven't had the same platform of closeness upon which to build. So for different reasons, yes, they are the standard, especially when you compare them to things like the Comprehensive Economic Partnership that the ASEAN countries are putting out, or some of the agreements we're seeing come out of Asia. So there are two tracks in trade, sort of diplomacy and trade agreements. The track that we're working on this side of the Pacific in Europe, and the track we're seeing coming from parts of Asia. So I think in terms of that balance, for the global agenda, it's critical that we work with groups like the Pacific Alliance and the TPP to strengthen that trend. And I'll let the other trend speak for itself.
Thank you very much. Mr. Innes, one of the questions I was going to ask you was talking about imports and exports to the four countries, and you did answer part of the question, or most of it in there, in your briefing. But talk to us about a bit about the potential then to the South, to South American markets, to the Pacific Alliance. Talk to us about the fact. I mean, I'm just a little curious as to how, we signed a free trade deal with Colombia before the U.S. did, and yet they have preferential treatment. So just talk to us how that happened, and obviously with a new agreement, there's obviously an opportunity to level the playing field again and move forward. But my question was, we saw the kind of exports on your website that talked about exports to Mexico and Chile, but we didn't see any to Colombia. But you answered the question in your briefing. So just talk to us a bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. So Mexico is a key market for us. We export a lot of canola seed and canola oil there because we've had tariff-free, stable access to Mexico with NAFTA, which hasn't been the case with Colombia, for example. With Colombia, we have exported significant amounts, and this tariff has had real impacts on our ability to export. So, for example, our exports fell by 75% between 2016 and 2017 because of this tariff and how it affected our exports. So Colombia is not the same size of a market like the United States or Mexico, but for our value-added processors who are selling bottled product that takes more effort to do in Canada, any market that they can sell to is very important to keep those facilities and those jobs operating. And so we've seen that our exports have been approximately $10 million to Colombia around canola oil, and we see opportunity to grow. So, for example, they import anywhere between $300 and $500 million of oil every year, and we only get a very small portion of that, partially because of the unpredictability that this tariff has to us. So the other thing I would add is that in terms of integration, we actually grow a lot of our Canadian seed in the off season. So right now it's growing in Chile, and then we'll come back up here in Canada to be grown in Canadian farmers' fields. So we do have a complementary relationship, but unfortunately this tariff does prevent us from seizing the opportunity in Colombia. Great.
I've only got about a minute and a half left. So, Mr. Day, back to you on where you see the benefits of Pacific Alliance. And I think it was more than just trade, but it's the harmonization. Could you talk a little bit about that in terms of whether it's mobility of labor? I mean, obviously that's part of the part that doesn't exist in CETA and those other things. Would that be part of what you see as being the important piece of this new deal?
Absolutely. So take movement of people. I mean, with this, we're talking about business professionals, students, and the like. For a Canadian enterprise like Scotiabank, the ability to have staff based in Peru be able to move through any of the countries seamlessly, not needing work permits for staff. You could have a central processing. Your commercial loan division could be in one country, and you can move to other countries seamlessly. The back office or the behind-the-border work on goods, customs pre-clearance, a single form for moving throughout the alliance. Moving with the alliance to take part in these openings would give us added benefits, similar to the things that we enjoy with the North American Free Trade Agreement. If you think of all the things we've added to NAFTA, it's not NAFTA itself, it's the Regulatory Cooperation Council, it's Beyond the Border, it's FAST. These are things that we've added to the trade agreement that give us real advantage in the U.S. We would be adopting the same things with the Pacific Alliance. So that would be that would be a major hidden benefit.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the Liberals, and Mr. Fonseca, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my first question I'll follow up on what Mr. Dade had to say, but it'll go to Mr. Lomas. Just looking at our recent success in terms of the agreement we have with the European community, with CETA, and now with our negotiations and looking at the modernization of NAFTA, what would you take from the longstanding NAFTA as well as from CETA, from those agreements, to address some of the challenges that you've brought forward, so the regulatory regime issues, as well as labor standards, environmental standards? Can you try tack on what you would take from those agreements and look at bringing that to the Pacific Alliance?
I'll first talk to NAFTA with respect to the trade we entered into with Mexico, where that Mexico has a 20.5% tariff on canned seafood products going into its market. And NAFTA allowed us to be able to enter that market when it came into force, and we were able to build a business, a small business, a small footprint, because with respect to our products and within seafood, we're probably different than many other industry participants in that we focus on value-added branded sales. And as such, we're actively competing against entrenched domestic competitors. Excuse me. So, and we sell, we participate with distributors in developing distribution at grocery retail outlets in these markets. It's an extremely competitive environment, and one that is very costly to enter in and build a branded presence. So we've had, I would say, very limited success. We have a very small share in Mexico. We've seen the competition get better than where they were when NAFTA started, and so the quality of the products that we've competed against has been elevated, and we've seen probably our business decline a bit in some of these markets since from a peak level several years ago. So there are other factors that go on just beyond just gaining a duty-free advantage. And CETA is another case in point. We have in fact actively looked at many of the markets, and as you can surmise, we've been in doing this for over 125 years, so it's a rather mature category, and we face competition within the EU, very, very capable and competent competition that have very entrenched brands in these markets. So we actually have benefited from sales into Europe that we were servicing from Canada previously, before the EU came into being, with basically selling product into ethnic expat communities from the Caribbean, in the UK, and in the Netherlands. And we actually had developed business in Eastern Europe that as these markets came into the EU realm, we basically then faced a 12.5% duty on canned sardine products and a 20% duty on canned herring products, and so a lot of those markets went away on us. We then had to switch our strategy to sourcing some of our product from Europe to make sure that we were competitive within Europe. And then in conjunction, with all of that, we faced a situation with a very challenging resource situation here in Atlantic Canada on the supply of herring that we use in the production of our canned sardines and canned herring products. So those factors really, had constrained us. So we were looking at CETA specifically as an opportunity. Perhaps there'd be an opportunity to expand into private label supply. And again, there we face a number of factors that we feel it's quite a challenging go in that regard also.
Okay.
Up your time, Ms. Fonseca, and we're going to move on. Thank you. I'd also like to welcome the Member of Parliament from Calgary, Minipore, Scusi. Welcome to our committee, and we're going to move on to the NDP now. And Ms. Ramsey, you got the floor for 5 minutes.
I'll hit it. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentations today. Mr. Lomas, I wanted to pick up on something that you said. You raised several concerns that you have about the Pacific Alliance and something that you said about labor and about the labor costs at risk in New Brunswick. I wonder if you can expand on that and really touch upon the amount of employees that you have there in the Atlantic and what you foresee under a potential Pacific Alliance, if there would be an impact on your workforce there.
Well, what I was referring to was a, sorry, there's an echo here. I felt that, or we felt that there was a situation where we know what the labor costs are in Mexico, what the labor costs are in Peru and in Chile, and each of those markets are different. There's different conditions in each of the market on a variety of regulatory and labor practices and standards and so forth. But all of this boils back to what is the ultimate cost of finished goods that come from each of these locations and from our own locations, and how competitive are we going to be against them? And there is clearly a difference in the labor costs that we pay here in Canada, so people can have a reasonable quality of life here, and versus what a producer is paying in Ecuador or in Mexico and so forth. So we have had to adjust over time, and we have had to look at increasing automation, and we've taken a lot of steps to make sure that we're much more efficient and less costly producer to ensure that we remain competitive, because we compete against each of these markets in a variety of each of these member states in a variety of markets that we currently service. So I'm really just talking about the fact is that we have to look very carefully at that, and that in these agreements that there are going to be not just actual wages, but also additional costs to maintaining a labor force that we pay for here in Canada that others may not have to pay for.
Thank you. I think it's that call for a level playing field, and you mentioned that in your presentation, and we hear that from many presenters here at the Trade Committee. My next question is to Mr. Innes, and you touched upon the misapplication of SPS and really some of the non-tariff barriers that exist for you in canola, and I wonder if you can expand on where you see potentials to address those issues in the Pacific Alliance specifically.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. One of the things I talked about was around plant breeding innovation. And Canada has been very progressive in seeking provisions in trade agreements that help ensure that when we introduce new plant breeding innovation, that doesn't create trade barriers with our partners. So for example, in the European Union, in the comprehensive and economic and trade agreement we have with them, there are provisions there that create a dialogue and a commitment that there will be open dialogue between regulators on products of biotechnology, for example, and that we work together to help ensure that regulatory barriers don't prevent the adoption of innovation and prevent trade from flowing between our two countries, even though our regulators may both deem the product to be safe and to be studied very well. So in the whole area of plant breeding innovation, it cuts across crops, whether it's canola or whether it's vegetables. There's an incredible opportunity to help continue improve the ability of plants to withstand diseases and drought and other pressures that face plants. And so when we think about a trade agreement, it's an opportunity to help regulators in different countries talk to each other more often and think about how we can allow us to adopt innovation, allow them to adopt innovation and allow us to do what we do best and grow what we grow best in each country, but be able to trade those products back and forth.
So in TPP, there was the creation of these committees that would exist, and they would meet frequently. But really, there was a call for even more strengthening of the ability of those committees to really enact things, to have issues come forward, to resolve them. What could you see in a potential committee in the Pacific Alliance that would really have teeth to be able to address these issues?
What we would see is a real firm opportunity to have firm language. So firm language that the committee shall meet when concerns come up, for example, that there shall be notice provided to exporters and importers if concerns arise in a timely manner. So being able to put provisions in a trade agreement so that we're not stuck in a situation where we have ambiguity, that there's no clear incentive or requirement for regulators to discuss when these issues come up. We see trade agreements as a way to ensure that that dialogue happens, it happens in a timely way, and we can work together to solve any concerns that arise.
Okay, excellent. Do I have time?
You're all good, and we're going to move over to Liberals now. Madam Ludwig, you got the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to direct most of my questions. If I have anything left, I'll go to the other people here, to Mr. Lomas. So good morning. As you probably well know, I live in St. Andrews, not too far from Blacks Harbour, and I've had the opportunity several times to tour the facilities in Blacks Harbour, and you know what, thank you. Thank you for all the employment opportunities that are certainly offered locally, and I speak often with Tony. So I do want to go back to my colleagues' questions regarding regulatory requirements, and you know what, we are talking this morning about the Pacific Alliance, so I've got two specific areas I'd like to ask you about. One is the area on the domestic sales. So how much of your sales are in Canada?
Currently the Canadian canned seafood category is worth about $415 million. And as I said, we're a little under half of all canned seafood sales in Canada. With respect to the Blacks Harbour, or with these in the sardine category, we currently have about a 55 share of that market. We used to have a higher share, but as for reasons I cited earlier, we've seen increasing costs in our operation that we've had to pass along, and that has had an effect on our market share. But this is, our Canadian sales right now are very strong. I think, as I was saying before, we've been significantly affected on a constrained supply situation that we've been looking at various avenues to try and address, in terms even importing raw material requirements. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm just going to jump in, Mr. Lomas, right there. One would be looking at your 55% in terms of the canned sales in Canada. What is the potential impact if canned sardines from the Pacific Alliance were more integrated into the Canadian market with an agreement without any provisions on labor standards?
I think it's a long-term competitive issue there, because they already have access to this market. Canada has not applied substantial tariffs at all to importations of canned sardine products for some time, and so we've contended with that for a number of years. It's a little more complex than just tariff, because there's over 20, I think there's 22 different species of small fish, small marine fish, that can be canned as sardines and canned and sold as a sardine product. And as I mentioned earlier, we focus on canned herring, herring as a raw material, and that has a very distinct taste profile and form versus some of the other products. So there's been a preference that has been built up in a number of the markets that we've serviced for a number of years. And certainly Canadians have a preference for the kind of sardine product that we produce. But that is something, as I said, Peru has been selling into this market once they gained the FTA. I can't, so far, I don't believe there's a great deal of sales of Mexican product or Colombian product, or for that matter, Chilean product. I think they've all tried.
As for the supply side, I know that that's certainly been a challenge. How important is it that we harmonize the regulatory standards within signatory countries, such as if you're importing herring from Sweden or somewhere like that? How important is it that we have similar standards in inspection?
I think it's critically important because it's all about having a level playing field, because there's a cost to us to produce under those regulatory regimes, where for us, these regimes are what they are, and they do a very good job of ensuring a very high quality product that we produce, and a safe product. And we want to see that those standards are applied to other Pacific Alliance members.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ludwig. And I knew you'd be asking questions about your riding. Doing a good job. Okay, Madam Lapointe, you got the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to welcome everyone. I have a question for Mr. Innes. I don't have too much time. You said earlier that if each country did what was best, we would ultimately all be winners. You were referring to canola. Now, how could the countries of the Pacific Alliance help us with imports? Thank you for the question.
From Pacific Alliance countries is actually canola, which is strange when you think about the fact that we are 2/3 of the global trade in canola, but we actually import seed that's grown out in the winter in Chile to grow here in Canada, because that helps us speed up the process. A canola plant takes so long to grow, and we only have one growing season here in Canada, but by being able to work in the off-season in Chile, where right now it's very warm, we can grow out our seeds there and then import them back into Canada and speed up the process of growing seeds. There are a number of other things that Pacific Alliance countries do. The climate is a huge factor in vegetables and fruit, for example. It's pretty hard to grow things in the winter outside here in Canada, so with fresh fruit and vegetables, Peru has really excelled in asparagus production, for example, because of their climate. So there's a number of opportunities that each particular geography has to excel and do what they do best.
par rapport, on n'a pas entendu tellement parler.
We haven't heard as much about labor mobility. Could you tell us more about labor mobility? If you think that there's ways to improve this situation, we have agreements with Europe and the NAFTA countries. How do you see that?
The integration would allow us, again, to move people within these countries more fluidly. It would also allow Canadian companies that have staff in these countries to move that staff more fluidly without the necessity for, say, work visas or labor decisions to move staff back and forth. So the fluidity of labor would add to what we have in these other agreements. Also, I should note that the Pacific Alliance and the work on things like labor mobility, phytosanitary, it's an ongoing process. This is not a simple agreement that stands static in time. The Alliance is constantly working to update measures. The committees that are part of the Alliance, working with the Inter-American Development Bank, are constantly updating regulations, are constantly innovating and putting new measures into place. So with the mobility of people, they're looking at a common entry visa to facilitate trade with Asia. And that's something that's going to give them a competitive advantage over NAFTA and Asian countries wishing to do business on this side of the Pacific. So taking part would give us access to this agenda, which is ongoing and constantly being updated. To your question, too, with the phytosanitary measures. The track record that the Alliance has, I would argue, is more important than mandated provisions that the measures be adapted. You look at what they've done and how consistently they've moved measures from these committees into action. I would argue that that track record is
J'aurais une autre
impressive.
question. Par rapport, M. Innes,
I have another question. Mr. Innes, earlier you referred, with regard to the Pacific Alliance, if I understand correctly, you wanted whether it could become an advantage to negotiate subsequently with China. Could you tell us about that? And perhaps Mr. Dade has something to add on that. Thank you.
Is that trade agreements that are negotiated today influence the trade agreements that are negotiated tomorrow and 10 years from now. So the Canada-Europe agreement, for example, is one of the most progressive agreements in the world, and when trade negotiators and governments look to negotiate their next agreement, they look at what has already been established. So when we have been negotiating in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in the original Trans-Pacific Partnership, we've seen many of those provisions, for example, come into negotiations with NAFTA. And so when we think about an agreement with 4 countries across the Pacific Alliance, and indeed beyond that with other associate members like Australia and New Zealand, we see an opportunity to build momentum for standards and provisions that help enable more stable and open trade, because it takes time to be able to reach consensus around how we can do that. And every agreement builds on previous agreements, and the Pacific Alliance, with a group of aligned countries, many agricultural exports amongst those countries, it's an opportunity to help move that forward.
c'est fini?
No, short answer, go ahead.
Avec Alina, la relation entre Alina et Alliance Pacifique. So,
With regard to NAFTA, the relationship between it and the Pacific Alliance,
from what they learned, what they saw in NAFTA, how successful we were in North America in creating an integration agenda that went beyond the agreement. So for influencing China and agreements around Asia, absolutely. Again, there's another agenda for trade integration on the other side of the Pacific and Asia that's coming out of the RCEP and other agreements. Creating facts on the ground, creating rules and agreements between countries establishes precedents, while other countries in Asia are establishing precedents for more illiberal trade. So there are 2 competing agendas going on here, and everything we can do to strengthen one that is progressive, that does have more liberal values, is in a strategic sense important.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam LaPointe. Good questions. We're getting tight for time, but we have room for one question from Mr. Tilson. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, we've been talking about CETA, which was a pretty successful agreement. It appears to have been a very successful agreement. There were substantial negotiations that went on with CETA, with the provinces, with the municipalities, with the business people. Starting with Mr. Innes, do you think that there's adequate consultations that have gone on with the government with respect to these proposals?
Thank you very much for the question. What we've seen over the last number of years, and certainly in recent times, is there's been ample and comprehensive consultations both with this committee as well as the government, and an opportunity for every Canadian to be able to express their views on trade and anything related to our relations with those countries that may be affected by an agreement with those countries. So from our perspective, in the agriculture sector, we speak regularly to the provinces, who are regularly engaged with the federal government on matters of trade. We have seen the federal government, including this committee, have multiple public consultations on trade agreements, and so we're very pleased with the level of engagement on trade. We see that as very important in ensuring not just the 40,000 farmers who are small and medium-sized enterprises who see their real future in trade, but for other folks who may not see trade in the same way that someone who exports 90% of their products sees trade. So the consultation, we feel, has been quite effective, and I think it's important because it helps us communicate how past deals aren't as good as, say, the Americans' agreement with Colombia. So that opportunity is very much appreciated.
Okay, sir.
That's it? No, have there been lessons learned with respect to CETA, perhaps provisions in CETA that should not be there?
From our perspective, CETA was a step forward in where we had come from before that. For what we see is the need to make sure we implement CETA and follow through on those provisions and those commitments. In the agriculture sector, even in canola, for example, we have provisions around regulatory cooperation that we feel the spirit is not being respected currently when it comes to things like crop protection products. So there are things not necessarily that we don't like about CETA, but we're not very happy about how those measures are being followed through, Don.
On the consultations, yes and no. You know, you do reach groups that are important, that are involved in trade to get input. But what's missing is the ability to use the consultations to meet with groups that haven't been participating in trade and have been marginalized. First Nations, female-led firms. It's going to take you close to a decade to negotiate trade agreements. You can use the consultation to identify issues that prevent these groups from participating in the agreement when it's signed 10 years later. We're losing valuable time to be able to reach out to groups and work with them on trade capacity building to be able to take advantage of the agreements. So that's one of the recommendations that I've been working on, and working with the member from Winnipeg Centre. In talking about First Nations and how to get them involved. You've got to use the consultations more, not just to get input, but to identify people in advance and use the time during the negotiations to be able to work with them. You also need to better understand what exemptions are needed in trade agreements to protect domestic policy to be able to work with these groups.
Thank you, sir. And as you know, you probably know, previously we had a study on TPP and we did broad consultation, but your point is well taken. And good panel this morning and good dialogue with MPs. We're going to break just for 1 minute, guys, so don't go too far away because they're going to go in the camera. Okay, we're all good to go? Welcome. Welcome to our study on the Canada Pacific Alliance. Sorry for the delay. We had some important business we had to catch up on, but we're going to try to catch up with all the presentations we have here right now. So we have with us here for the second half, we have Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, we have the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, and we have the Mining Suppliers Trade Association of Canada. So let's get started right off the bat. If some of you were here before in front of committees, but if you haven't been, we try to keep it under 5 minutes each presentation so we can have a good dialogue with the MPs. So we're going to start right off the bat with the Canadian Agri-Food Alliance, and we got Claire. Good to see you back. You have the floor. Are you good to go?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, CAFTA, to speak on a subject of a potential agreement between Canada and the Pacific Alliance. CAFTA, as you know, is the voice of Canadian agri-food exporters, representing the 90% of farmers who depend on trade and ranchers, producers, processors, and agri-food exporters who want to grow the economy through better and competitive access to international markets. This includes the beef, pork, meat, grains, cereals, pulses, soybeans, canola, as well as the sugar, malt, and processed food industries. Together, our members account for 90% of Canada's agri-food exports, which in 2016 exceeded $55 billion and support over 1 million jobs across rural and urban communities in Canada. A significant portion of these jobs and sales would not exist without competitive access to world markets. Canada is an enthusiastic supporter of negotiating new trade agreements which create job opportunities and growth opportunities for our exporters. Trade is one of our main drivers, as 60% of the value of the sector is generated through exports. Over half of everything we produce is exported. That's half of our beef, 65% of our soybeans, 70% of our pork, 75% of our wheat, 90% of our canola, and 95% of our pulses, as well as 40% of our processed food products. Over the last 10 years in Canada, Canadian agri-food exports have grown by more than 100%, from $27 billion to $61 billion. And this is why Canada's agri-food sector has been highlighted for its significant contributions to the Canadian economy in the Advisory Council on Economic Growth as a key sector for growth, due in part to the sector's focus on exports. And this was further represented by the ambitious goal to grow Canada's agri-food exports to $75 billion annually by 2025. Our agri-food exporters generate a GDP of $95 billion for agriculture and food manufacturing, and food and beverage manufacturing alone is the largest manufacturing employer in Canada, 60% of which is concentrated in Ontario and Quebec, with close to 250,000 jobs, more than the automotive and aerospace sectors combined. Today, our priorities are twofold. First, it's paramount that Canada ratifies the CPTPP quickly, and we urge the government to implement it without delay. We've been a strong supporter of the deal and applauded the fantastic news that Canada concluded the talks about 10 days ago in Tokyo. The CPTPP will not only provide the sector with unprecedented access to the high-value Japanese market and rapidly growing Asian markets like Vietnam and Malaysia, it will also provide Canada with a competitive advantage over the U.S. since that country is not part of the agreement. We understand that the CPTPP will enter into force after at least 6 members ratify it, and we understand also that it's very likely that 7 members will ratify and implement the agreement before the end of the summer, if not sooner. Canada may lose the first mover's advantage if it's not in the first tranche of countries ratifying the deal. So the best chance to implement the agreement quickly is to ratify it quickly. Second priority, due to the importance of NAFTA to Canadian agriculture trade, CAFTA urges the government to continue working to reach a modernized agreement that will strengthen the access and competitiveness of the nation's farm and food products. In short, it's important to maintain what's currently working very well and modernize the deal where possible. Specifically, the renegotiations should not allow the introduction of new tariff or non-tariff barriers, or any new provisions that could be used to limit trade. In our submission, CAFTA has identified several areas for improvements. and where NAFTA could enable further growth for specific products such as canola, grains, meats, sugar-containing products, amongst others, and in areas such as greater regulatory cooperation and dispute settlement mechanisms. Specifically on the Pacific Alliance, in 2016, Canada exported $2.7 billion in agriculture and agri-food products to the 4 Pacific Alliance members, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. About 2/3 of that total was accounted for by Mexico, also a NAFTA partner. In addition, as you know, Canada has free trade agreements with some of the Pacific Alliance members, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. Despite bilateral FTAs existing between Canada and some of the Pacific Alliance members, there are opportunities to improve upon the existing agreements and boost agriculture and agri-food exports. While CAFTA supports an agreement with Canada and the Pacific Alliance in principle, it is essential that negotiations with this alliance does not compromise Canada's ability to complete other agreements such as NAFTA and our ability to ratify other agreements such as the TPP, with our members viewing these as being significantly higher priorities. So if this condition can be met, CAFTA sees multiple potential benefits with the Pacific Alliance. First, eliminating remaining tariffs. You've just heard from the Canola Council, canola being an example for getting better access into Colombia. I believe you heard over the last few days on pork as well. Deepening the commitments in the existing free trade agreements with Pacific Alliance members to achieve science-based outcomes in regulatory measures to protect human, plant, and animal health and safety would be another area. We also see an opportunity to pursue common frameworks for approval of animal and plant health inputs and new breeding techniques. And a free trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance should also include common low-level presence and maximum residue limit standards and policies. Overall, an agreement with the Pacific Alliance region would also continue Canada's historically beneficial participation in plurilateral negotiations, from which results can exceed those available from attempting to complete bilateral agreements, as well as establishing a platform for expansion to other nations. This is one of the reasons for CAFTA's staunch support for Canada's participation in the CPTPP.
Thank you. And we're going to move over to Canadian manufacturers and exporters, and we got Mr. Wilson, Senior Vice President. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone, for inviting us here to speak on behalf of Canada's 90,000 manufacturers and exporters and our association's 2,500 direct members to express our support for Canada joining the Pacific Alliance. Manufacturing is the single largest business sector in Canada. The manufacturing industry's contribution is critical for the wealth generation that sustains the standard of living of every Canadian. Industry sales surpassed $600 billion in 2017 for the fourth consecutive year, and directly accounted for 11% of Canada's total economic output, while employing over 1.7 million Canadians in highly productive, value-added, high-paying jobs. Manufacturing is an export-intensive business. More than half of Canada's industrial production is exported directly, accounting for roughly 75% of Canada's total exports. In 2017, manufacturing exports to the Pacific Alliance countries alone totaled more than $7 billion. And while these numbers are impressive, we believe more is possible. That's why in 2016, CME embarked on an ambitious task to consult with domestic industry on an action plan to double manufacturing output and value-added exports by 2030. This initiative, called Industry 2030, connected with roughly 1,250 business executives from coast to coast. A major pillar, and with the feedback from those executives, focused directly on growing exports and helping companies find new customers in domestic and foreign markets. Simply put, in order to grow domestic industry, we must open new markets around the world because Canada's markets are too small. However, simply signing an FTA is not the solution. We must sign FTAs that actually grow exports, not just increase imports. As such, CME has always been clear that no trade agreement is worth signing unless the deal meets 3 objectives. First, it creates a fair and level playing field for Canadian manufacturers and exporters and ensures that they have an equal opportunity to export into foreign markets as our competitors have to import into Canada. 2, it increases the amount of value-added exports from Canada, not just the export of natural resources. And finally, it does not undermine the existing integrated manufacturing supply chains developed through previous FTAs, especially the NAFTA. Free trade agreements are only as beneficial as the amount of new value-added trade they create. Value-added exports create the wealth and prosperity that governments and all Canadians want and expect. But too often in the past, FTAs have not led to these outcomes. Outside NAFTA, Canada's export record with other countries has been mixed, including those with the Pacific Alliance, with whom we have existing bilateral FTAs. That does not stop CME from supporting the proposed new agreement, but it should provide us a point of inflection on how to make this new agreement more successful for Canadian exporters. First, we do fully support the entry in the Pacific Alliance because it does allow us to update and modernize existing frameworks that companies are working within with the countries. Second, and most importantly, while we support the agreement, we believe Canada can and must do more to ensure successful outcomes for Canadian industry. We believe that in addition to signing the new FTA, new supports must be put in place to help Canadian companies find new markets and customers in the region, especially SMEs. Canada has many small businesses, but not enough medium and large-sized companies. In fact, over 95% of manufacturers have under 10 employees, and many do not have internal expertise or financial ability to expand globally. Governments have excellent support programs, but they should be consolidated to ease access for small companies into new markets. And these actions should include additional funding and support for Trade Commissioner Service to better connect Canadian exporters to business opportunities in the region, enhanced corporate funding for trade missions, research, and export promotion into the region, improved Export Accelerator Program, which is currently underway at Global Affairs, to get more companies into the program to take advantage of the coordinated services and opportunities in the region. Should be introducing an export mentorship program to help companies understand the opportunities in the region from business executives that have done work in the region. And finally, we should look at introducing a new export tax credit for companies who are actively growing exports into that region and beyond. In addition, if Canada's economy is to grow and to create new middle-class jobs through expanded trade, we need to set up domestic business environment that will enable this growth. This includes competitive corporate taxes, encouraging small businesses to scale up, and ensuring that trade deals create level playing fields for manufactured goods. In summary, CME supports Canada's entry into the FTA with the Pacific Alliance and other trade agreements that expand market access on a reciprocal basis and will lead to a prosperous manufacturing sector in the Canadian economy. However, we must ensure effective domestic supports help companies take advantage of these new market opportunities. Thank you again for inviting me. I look forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you, sir. And we're going to go over to the Mining Suppliers Trade Association of Canada. We got the president, Mr. Kinsella. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee on behalf of the Mining Suppliers Trade Association of Canada. My name is Phil Kinsella, and I am the president of the board of directors for the association. My opening statement today will provide a brief outline of our association and its members, then highlight some key findings from a study we participated in that shows how mining suppliers are an important part of generating employment in the mining ecosystem, and finally, how Canada's engagement on free trade with the Pacific Alliance trade bloc is a natural fit for Canadian mining supply and services sector, MSS. MSTA Canada is a national voice for Canada's mining supply and services sector, and over the past 35 years, the association has supported its members in connecting them to opportunities to grow their businesses in the mining industry across Canada and around the world. In terms of government activity and decision-making, we look to serve our members' interests under two guiding principles. The first principle is a reduction in the complexity and uncertainty of doing business. This can be through more efficient processes with clear, understandable, and timely outcomes. The second principle is to have an increase in the access to opportunities to do business. This can be in the form of opening of markets or reduction in barriers to trade, and it's our second principle that aligns with Canada's participating in the Pacific Alliance Free Trade Agreement. Our approximately 280 corporate members are located across the country and supply the entire mining industry spectrum, from mining exploration, resource development, mine design and construction, mine operations, and refining to reclamation and closure. Most of these companies are small to medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs. I will elaborate more on the demographics of the mining suppliers in my second portion of my remarks, but overall, it has been estimated that there are approximately 3,700 companies across Canada that consider themselves as mining suppliers. I would like to highlight one very important aspect of our focus as an association, which is export. with Canada representing 0.05% of the global population and 1.4% of the world GDP, we are all by accounts a trading nation to ensure prosperity, economic prosperity. And with that perspective, there is a great opportunity for Canadian mine supplier network by just following Canadian exploration and mining activities abroad, let alone the international mining customers. In the mining industry, the Made in Canada brand is recognized around the world for its safe, reliable, environmentally sound, and productive solutions. I will now turn to our study. The Conference Board of Canada categorizes the mining supply and services sector as a multi-million-dollar, widely varied industry in Canada and around the world. It is a hidden sector that is not directly measured or tracked. To help provide a better understanding and clarity of our hidden sector, MSTA Canada participated in a Pan-Ontario mining supply and services sector economic impact study. There are three key findings from the report I would like to highlight here today. The first finding is that mining supply and services sector is a widely varied group of companies which were grouped into three major categories. The 58% were categorized as mining equipment and supplies and services. 13% were categorized as mining contract services. These two categories are what most people think as typical mining supplier. However, it is a remaining 31% that get typically overlooked. These are, for example, the financial services, accounting companies, law firms, environmental services, and information technology. The second key finding is that almost 88% of the companies that surveyed are categorized as SMEs, and 70% report exporting outside of Canada. So free trade agreements are very meaningful to the mining, supply, and services sector. The final finding I would like to highlight from the study is in terms of direct employment. The mining, supply, and services sector represents 2.5 times as many jobs as the mining companies employ themselves. This is an important point because as mining is a great economic developer, the mining, supply, and services sector across Canada will be an important generator of jobs. Our final point is directed towards the Pacific Alliance trade bloc, which contains Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. These are considered the top 4 countries which Canadian mining, supply, and services sector target their export marketing efforts in Latin America. To help understand why our research has shown that the Pacific Alliance trade bloc hosts over 500 active exploration and mining projects. In addition, there are more than 220 Canadian-based exploration and mining companies active within the Pacific Alliance, which operates or have ownership in 43% of these projects. This data shows why Canada is a natural fit as a member of the Pacific Alliance for the Canadian mining, supply, and services sector. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, panelists, and we're going to go right into a dialogue with the MPs, and we got the Conservatives up for the first 5 minutes. Mr. Allison, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Wilson, I'll start with you. You alluded to this in your opening comments, and I think we can't say this enough. We can't highlight it enough, and I just want you to mention it again. Like, trade deals are great, Pacific Alliance, all these things are amazing, but we've got to deal with our own competitive issues at home. Would you just talk about the thing? I mean, taxation was one of the things, but what are some of the other things we need to work on here at home to make these trade deals actually valuable as we move forward?
Sure, it's a good question. So I'd start by saying that companies can only export what they can produce. It's hard to export things that they're not able to produce. So one of the problems we have in Canada is actually we're at capacity pretty much for in all sectors across manufacturing. So when we're talking about 75% of exports are actually manufactured, produced goods, and we're at capacity in manufacturing, signing new trade agreements doesn't actually lead to increased exports because the companies themselves can't produce more to get it out. They might be able to invest and do other things, but they're unable really to grow their production to export it much more than they already are. So in order to get them to export in the first place, you need them to increase their investment. And so there's a number of things we've certainly been talking about with all governments for a while, but we certainly need to see things like looking at corporate tax rates. The U.S. just passed a massive corporate tax reform bill, which has had major investments in a wide variety of sectors in the U.S., which will boost their production capacity. And things like accelerated cost of capital allowances, which this government has extended, and we'd like to see brought on speed with the U.S. has done, which would be a one-year write-off. But that capital investment is critical to boost the output, but also boost the productivity. If the companies can't compete against foreign companies that are competing with them because they're less productive, say, than a foreign multinational or a foreign exporter, they're not going to have the same opportunities both at home and abroad. So that competitiveness piece plays both on their ability to grow investment here to boost their capacities to be able to export abroad, but also on how they're dealing with imports from offshore. Because if we're not producing, and this is the same with TPP or CETA or any other deal, if they're not able to produce at world competitive prices, they are going to be beat by someone else when you're under a free trade agreement. And that's why that domestic competitiveness is so easy. So investment's critical. The regulatory environment is really critical. Helping companies train up and skill their workers for new technologies and to be more innovative are really critical. So all those things, they all play a role. It's not just one thing. It's a wide variety of policies that need to take place to actually help companies grow and be able to be export and globally competitive.
Thank you. I know we could do a whole study just to productivity. That's a different question for a different day. Yeah. In the previous presentation, the first one this morning, it was almost like you and Mr. Dade were sort of running off the same notes there. You talk about trying to get access to SMEs, all these other services. As I said, I think our government's got a lot of great services of export development, trade commissioners, but the challenge is still a lot of these small companies and SMEs don't either have the capacity to access or don't have the knowledge or the expertise, whatever it is. So talk to us a bit, because you talked about in your remarks, and Mr. Dade also did as well in the first round. Talk to us about that.
So I think it was Minister Fast at one time, he say 98% of Canadian companies don't export. And they don't export because they're really small and don't have any capability to export. So capacity is one thing, capability is something else entirely. And so if we're going to be successful in global markets, we need to scale companies up. It's certainly something we're working with Minister Baines and I said through their innovation agenda on. But they have to be of certain scale to be able to actually get them to grow. A small company of 5 or 7 employees in a machine shop or something like that aren't going to be really looking at global opportunities. They're probably barely exporting outside their own province. So I think we really do need to focus the resources on high growth potential companies and companies that have better alignment towards global opportunities in key sectors. And mining would be a good one. Food would be another really good one, especially when you're talking about the Pacific Alliance. Instead of Canada trying to be all things to all people when we're trying to do export promotion, we should target specific sectors into specific regions that actually have a chance of success rather than just hoping other sectors will catch on and go there.
Thanks. Mr. Doral, I question for you. I mean, we had the Canola Council, which I know is a member of your organization, in the first, and they talked about the huge potential there in terms of agri-food. Obviously, you represent a ton of organizations. Talk to us about what kind of potential you see. I'm seeing here that we've got exports of over almost $1 billion towards the Pacific Alliance countries and nations. How much more room do you see for us to be able to grow? And I know Canola Council talked about just tariffs in Colombia, for example. So talk to us about how much more opportunity you see things happening in agri-food.
Just a short answer, please.
So for the Pacific Alliance, our exports are just under $3 billion. There are opportunities to reduce tariffs and grow our exports through this, but also to, in principle, what regional free trade agreements can do is help create supply chains. And through regional agreements, what we can do is also ensure that all partners abide by science-based rules. Those are mechanisms that are easier to implement in regional free trade agreements rather than bilateral agreements. What I'd like to add also is that our industries has the capacity to supply new markets and just on my colleague's earlier point, it's actually the market signals that will provide the incentive for the exporters to export. So ensuring that the free trade agreements provide real commercial viable access is what will get our exporters to export.
Thank you. We're going to go over to Liberals now. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this morning. Ms. Sito, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you a question about something that you might not be aware of, so forgive me if you don't. But the Canadian Chamber of Commerce recently came out with recommendations, and there was 10, I think 10 recommendations how to make sure that Canada's economy remains competitive. And one of them was to make sure Canada becomes and remains and grows as an agri-food center. Do you see, I mean, I'm going to assume you see that as an important goal. Do you see these trade deals as a good way of achieving that goal and a good step towards maintaining the agri-food industry in Canada?
Very, very much so. Because we are an export-oriented sector, our growth comes from international markets. So agreements like NAFTA, the CETA, CPTPP, and others, agreements with China are key to help us reach the $75 billion target set by in budget 2017. We see opportunities for the commodities, but very much so for the food manufacturing sector. So with employers both in urban and rural communities in our country.
That's good, and that's a good segue. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Wilson. That seems to be in line with what Mr. Wilson said of one of the three objectives of the CME when you analyze FTAs. One of them, I think, was make sure there's value-added exports and not just the resources, not just the commodities. Yeah. Ms. Cito seems to be agreeing with that sentiment. Can you, Mr. Wilson, elaborate on why that's important and the jobs that could create?
Sure, and you know, we have a history. If you actually look back through you know all of our trade agreements, really aside from the Canada-U.S. one, most of our trade agreements has resulted in increase in raw materials, primarily only natural resources. But the value really comes from what you do with natural resources. Our country is founded on turning natural resources, whether that's mining or whether it's through agri-food or forestry or anything else. That's how we built our country originally, was turning stuff into things and exporting it back to people around the world. And that's critical. That's where the wealth comes from. It's where the higher paying jobs are and the innovation comes from. So it's critically important. And I think those sectors still have some of the ones that are especially that are based around our primary industries, agri-food, mining, forestry, have some of the greatest opportunities for growth globally. We're world leaders in these for a reason. We've been doing them for a long time and doing them really well. But the companies often aren't export-oriented either. I know Claire mentioned a lot of numbers on agri-food, and they're all really impressive. But they're also with agri-food generally, and I know there'll be different companies will say different things, but it's about 25% of Canada's manufacturing output is in agri-food, but it's only 8% of our exports. And right. So, to me, that's a real opportunity for us. We have a brand. We create really high-quality, safe foods, but we don't export enough of it around the world. And that, to me, is the real opportunity. We should be focusing our resources on a sector like this to actually help the companies go global, because it could create a lot more wealth for Canada overall.
Right. So I think these agreements and the improved agreement, and we're talking specifically about the Pacific Alliance here, would certainly, I think, provide that opportunity. But the opportunity is there, but I think, what do you think we need to do to encourage participants to take advantage of that opportunity that we might not be doing now?
Who, me?
Yeah, I think that can be open to anyone, but whoever wants to.
Yeah, I think Mr. Wilson raised a good point about the size of in my industry, in the mining industry, the size of the companies that we're talking about are typically 35 to 100 people, and they don't have the resources, so they need to be educated on how to export. That's one of the things that MSTA does, is to show them how to export. But bringing an innovation to market, it takes too much time, and there's a lot of risk involved. So we have to cut down that risk. I mean, some of the inventors of Canadian products have told me that they've been working on their ideas for 15 years, and that's a long time. So it may be a good idea, but they don't have the money and the resources to bring it to market. So I think we want to encourage these inventors. We want to encourage innovation in all the industries, but we have to bring down the risk, somehow bring down the risk, and make it a partnership between industry, government, and also the universities. Bring them all together so that we got the think tank, we got the money, and we got the means of doing it.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'd like to answer your question. I think it's important that these free trade agreements actually work. And for that to happen is ensuring that they are ratified. The CPTPP, we understand, will be signed next month in Chile. It's important that it ratifies for it to become law and for exporters to actually benefit for the provisions that will come into force. Another example is the CETA. There remains a number of outstanding issues for the sector. These need to work. These non-tariff barriers need to be addressed, both for the grain and the meat sector currently at the time.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm out of time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're going to go over to NDP, and Ms. Ramsey, you got 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our presenters. You've raised a number of really interesting things that I think we really need to look at as a country. And, you know, one of them is some of the domestic supports and policy pieces that you were speaking about, Mr. Wilson, and, you know, really the need in our country for policies to, you know, cover our major sectors. So if we had a manufacturing policy in Canada at this point that incorporated some of the things that you've mentioned, you know, what we're facing in NAFTA, we could be strengthened against. And really, you know, this is the way forward in the future because, as you said, you know, the doors are opening in these FTAs, but not everyone's actually able to go through those doors and see some significant gain. So I wonder if you could speak to the importance of a manufacturing policy overall to maybe incorporate some of those ideas that you've mentioned.
Well, I think, and the two go hand in hand. I think we often get stuck looking at domestic issues and export issues in kind of two different silos, and that's why we, you know, in our comments we try to talk about how they're connected together. And if you look at really successful export-oriented countries, Germany, South Korea, Japan, U.S. off the top of my head, they combine the two together. They have an industrial strategy that really is tied into an export strategy, and everything they do everything possible in a Team Japan way to make sure they're benefiting and supporting exporters that are tied into the domestic strengths that they have. And we just don't have a good history of doing that in Canada. I can't even think of maybe a little bit in the aerospace sector, but aside from that, we don't really do much of that in Canada at all. And so we need to look at it as a continuum because that's the way businesses look at it, as a continuum. It's they're creating a product and they're you know, the risk of kind of the original R&D and commercialization of that whole process. And we have supports there which could be used to be improved, but then we don't look at it as how that connects to on the export side. So I think it's an excellent point you make, and it's something that I think that we need a deeper dive or a deeper understanding of what that could look like in Canada to tie an economic development strategy and export strategy together. And I know that there are people talking about, including Minister Champagne, his office, are looking at that. But it is a critical piece. If we're going to be successful, we have to have a tied together strategy that helps companies right from the early stage of innovation right through to export and get them going internationally and not just kind of staying at home or in their local city, which is typically the case of what they do.
Mm-hmm. You also raise an interesting point about, you know, sectoral agreements, because what we're often seeing, and I think we understand well, Ms. Souto, the benefit of trade and the critical importance of trade for agriculture. I don't think anyone disputes that, and to have access to those markets in a meaningful way to address some of the regulatory concerns and clarity and things that we know and we continue to hear agriculture calling for. So I think that an agriculture policy as well, you know, would maybe be able to domestically address these issues and strengthen our position in trade agreements. But, you know, what we're seeing now is kind of these things at odds with one another, right? In trade agreements where there's a great benefit to one sector, often to the detriment of another, which I think is really unfortunate because I don't think that we should be pitted against each other. I think we should be trying to elevate everyone and make sure that everyone's receiving that. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to each of you individually, if you see, you know, what challenges you see there, but what opportunities you see to be able to support each other, and are sectoral agreements something that you're talking about in your sectors?
I'll let you go first.
Like, I'm happy to, but I've been talking. Well, I think it is important, and let's use South Korea and the dispute that got into between, say, pork producers and auto manufacturers. It wasn't helpful for anyone on either side of it, and it's something that we need to figure out ways to structure agreements, and sometimes maybe the best way to do it is through sectoral agreements. And I think in the CPTPP, from what I understand, is that they have taken several side agreements that look specifically at sectors and the specific problems that they have within those sectors, so that you have an overall framework, but also a sub-framework that can help on some of those sectoral issues. Because our point on this agreement or any other agreement is you can't exclude parts of the economy from participating in a free trade agreement, whether it's agriculture, mining, auto, aerospace, doesn't matter. If the agreement doesn't open the markets for every part of the economy, there's no point in doing the agreement at all. It's got to help everyone. So I think we, in the past, maybe have gotten into this trade-off game between one sector or another, and to me, it's just not that helpful. I think we need to find ways to work around those differences within Canada, and whether that's through having a broader framework of a trade agreement with sub-agreements underneath it that help certain sectors on certain issues, that would be fine. We'd certainly support something like that, but the big thing for us is not excluding sectors from trade agreements. You just can't. You can't sign an agreement and say it's good for everyone but you because you don't qualify for some reason, which is frankly the case it's been in the past sometimes, and that's not good enough.
Right on. So we have time for one more MP, and Mr. Dhaliwal, you're the wrap-up guy.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome the presenters. Mr. Wilson, you have covered, we need to have an environment and policies in place that will help the export of the manufacturing industry. There is one also key component is the transportation infrastructure and port. I come from British Columbia, and Pam is here, and so it affects us as well. Would you be able to tell us what focus we should have on those issues?
Look, you can't move anything. It doesn't matter what it is without effective transportation networks, whether that's inside of a city or across the country. And certainly one of our focuses has been on kind of where we've looked at through Industry 2030 and our bigger picture of growing the manufacturing sector is to have better international trade connections. Unfortunately, I find that we tend to invest in a lot of things to get stuff into the country and not enough to get stuff out of the country. So China is a good example where in BC where boatload after boatload of stuff's coming from China. How many of those boats go back empty? And I'm guessing the majority of them go back empty. We're not really that well connected to get the stuff out, especially stuff from central Canada out. And it goes to both sides, whether it's through Halifax or Vancouver, the big ports for international exports. It's not that great. We do have a lot of great facilities, but I think we can do a lot better to make those national connections. And that's why those big national infrastructure funds, I think $50 billion, we've been pushing to get more of that put towards trade infrastructure rather than other infrastructure, which is all important, but we need to focus on trade infrastructure as well.
Ms. Sid, do you have comments to make?
This is something that will be handled by our members directly, so I'm happy to pass this on to them for them to follow up with you and the committee.
Mr. Kinsella?
Yes, thank you. A lot of our manufacturing in the mining industry is not near the ports, and the exporters have a problem getting. We're shipping to the coast, like Mr. Wilson had mentioned. So, making that more efficient would be a lifesaver in a lot of cases, because a lot of these companies that I'm just thinking of in Saskatoon, in Timmins, and those type of places, and they want to get their stuff out of the country, but it's not that easy and it's expensive. So anyway, go ahead.
So what particularly would you like to see the improvements made? Like
what specific thing?
Specific things, yeah.
The price. Making it more economical to do it. So that means probably we need to work more together as a team and trying to bundle things together that are going to similar countries, and getting them into those ships that are empty that when they bring stuff here. So there's no common place that we can go to and find how to bundle things together to make a bulker shipment that's going to a similar country.
So basically, you're looking for dry ports or something that we can have those where they can be bundled to be shipped.
It could be an index of these ships that are going to be leaving the country in the next 6 months, because they're coming in and we know they're going to be leaving.
Mr. Wilson, you have something to add?
Well, the only thing I was going to add, you talk about Halifax and Vancouver and Montreal, kind of the big international ports. The biggest international port's in Windsor, and we tend to forget that. Yeah, I know. And how long have we been trying to get a new bridge built in Windsor, as a good example? There is, and that's not just an automotive thing. In fact, it's actually all of our, I think half of our food exports go through that port as well. So it's not just kind of a perimeter port. Also within NAFTA, it's critically important we support that trade infrastructure. And it's not just the new Gordie Howe Bridge, but it's the 401 and everything that links to it. All of that's so important to drive our exports.
This new infrastructure bank that the government has put in, can you give me your views on that? Is it going to help the cause?
It should help. I guess we'll see what actually comes of it when it actually gets up and running, but it should help because part of the problem we've got into is a lot of short-term planning. This should look more at long-term strategic planning, and that's our hope anyways, that's what it'll do.
Okay.
Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
And appreciate it.
Mr. Dolly, well, perfect timing, and that wraps up our meeting this morning. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for your presentation and good questions from the MPs, good dialogue, and good timing. Very productive morning, folks, and we're going to suspend now. And for panelists, if you want a copy of our study, we'll be ready in a few months, and it's all good to go. See everybody Tuesday morning.